Well, good morning, YouTube. This is Chuck, and this morning I got another story for you, another firefighter story. And part of it is involves this building here, and like a lot of my stories, there's some twists and turns, and I'll try to make some sense in it. But this building's now an ice cream shop, but at one time it was a Circle K, and it was the original Circle K here in town. And eventually they built one in the north side of town, they built one in the south side of town, and they were called Circle K North, Circle K South, and this one was called Circle K Midtown. Well, as you can tell by looking, there's not a lot of property here, and they wanted to put in gas pumps, and they didn't really have room for it here, so eventually they closed this down. And this is, there have been a number of businesses in here. There's ice cream shops in here now, but that's only kind of a little bit of a sidebar to my story. So let me get over here where I can talk to you. So back in order to tell you the story, I got to tell you some groundwork, and so some backstory. Well, before we got our first full-time shift employees at the fire department in 1983, and this story that I'm getting ready to tell you is happened in the early 80s. I don't remember exactly when, but I'm going to say probably 81 or 82. And before we had full-time employees, we were a volunteer department, and at the time we actually had 3 full-time folks. I was a fire chief, my assistant fire chief was full-time, and we also had an office lady. So, but we didn't have any full-time shift people. So the way we dealt with that is we had a pretty large volunteer contingent at the time, and we had 3 engines, and we broke them down into 3 engine companies. Each engine company had an officer, an engineer, and a certain number of firefighters. For medical calls, routine medical calls, we ran a little rescue truck, and we called that squad duty. And the squad was made up of 4 people, and we had a day shift and a night shift from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. And then the night shift, of course, was 6 in the evening till 6 the next morning. And those 4 people would be made up of members off of those various engine companies. And we tried to always have an officer and a couple of trained medical people, and leave the number 4 spot for somebody new trying to get their experience. So 4 people on squad, and plus the engine companies. Now for a serious medical, we'd run the 4-person squad, and we'd back it up with an engine company. And out of the 3 engine companies, we'd rotate them monthly on what we call duty engine. And so every 3rd month, your engine company would be duty engine. That spread the calls out among the 3 engine companies and kind of kept everybody happy and kept everybody the same number of calls. So anyway, having said that, one night we got dispatched to Circle K Midtown, which was the building right behind me here, and for a report of an officer-involved shooting. So because of the nature of that, they dispatched both the rescue squad and the duty engine. Well, it was on a weekend, and my assistant chief was what we called the duty chief. He was the on-call supervisor, so he responded. But the squad officer that night was actually the officer off of what would be the duty engine. So, wanting to make sure that there was an officer riding on the engine, I went ahead and responded, even though I was technically off duty. I responded to the station to make sure the engine rolled, and I rode in the officer's seat on the engine. Well, we got over here, and what had happened, that's the story behind the officer-involved shooting is not really my story, but I got to tell you a little bit about it. It involved a domestic violence situation, and the police department and the county sheriff's department cornered the suspect here at the Circle K, and the suspect brandished a weapon, and both the officers ended up shooting him, and he ended up dying. The rescue squad got over here and started working him. We arrived with the duty engine, and we were told to stage out. They didn't need our help right at that moment, and so we parked basically right kind of behind the camera and sat there, and we were only there for a couple minutes watching the events unfold through the windshield of the fire truck. And then the dispatcher came over and said they had another call. Could they send us on it? And the duty chief said it's affirmative. So we were dispatched to the north part of town, which is what this story is actually all about. We responded, and it was another domestic violence call. I guess the planets aligned, and it was domestic violence night that night. So anyway, we arrived on the scene, and of course let me turn this just a little bit here. My hand's starting to hurt from holding it. So we arrived on the scene, and police department, as you can well imagine, they were pretty small back in those days, and they only had one guy on duty. The sheriff's department only had one deputy on duty, and they were both tied up at this call here. So while we were en route, they told us they didn't have any police officers to respond at that moment. They'd get somebody over there as soon as they could. And they also told us that the suspect had left and was not at the scene anymore. And they had no idea what his whereabouts were. Well, we got over to the scene, and I contacted the patient, who was the wife, and she'd been beat up pretty good, and it turned out I knew her, and I knew her husband. Well, her husband was a big guy and was known for being a mean drunk and a scrapper, and we had no idea where he was at, and there were no cops available. So we put our crew on the front porch, and she let me come in to talk to her, but she was not only somewhat injured, she wasn't beat really bad, but she was beat up a bit, and she was very humiliated and embarrassed by the whole thing. And us showing up, of course, didn't help matters any. So she didn't want to go to the hospital, and it wasn't really that bad, I guess, at least not initially. And so she let me in to talk to her. Well, I put my guys out on the front porch, and I told them, you know, if he comes back, do whatever you got to do to defend yourselves. And I wasn't worried about my guys in a physical confrontation. What I was worried about was whether this guy might show up with a gun. I got motorcycles going by, so there's some traffic noise. I tried to shoot this early in the morning when there wasn't much traffic, but there's a surprising amount of traffic for 8:30 in the morning. So anyway, the only thing we were worried about was that he was going to show up with a gun. And so make a long story short, I sat with that poor lady for 2.5 hours before they finally managed to get enough police officers called back in order to send somebody over to take over. She refused to go to the hospital, so I sat there with her and basically just didn't really have to do much to treat her, but she just needed somebody to be there with her. And so we did that. And unfortunately, we didn't have any females on this crew, female firefighters on this crew. And of course, there's always a lot of debate about the value of female firefighters. But when you got a gal that's well-trained and good at what she does, if you have a call involving either a kid or in this case, a battered wife, female firefighters are invaluable. But I sat with this poor lady for about 2.5 hours that night before they finally managed to get enough police officers in so they could come over and relieve us. And very active night. The shooting was a tragedy. Unfortunately, the suspect brandished a weapon, and police officers did what they had to do. But anyway, that's my story for this morning. Only part of it happened on this location. It's run a little bit long because there's a lot of moving parts. So I'll tell you, as I always do, to take care of each other, love each other. Once again, when firefighters go to work, they never know what they're going to do when they pull out the door. They never know what they're going to see. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not. But until I talk to you again, I'm just going to tell you, peace out for now. I'll give you another shot of that building. And we'll get back to you again pretty soon with another one. So right now, I'll just say peace out.